Welcome to week 90 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have watched the Monday, April 14th episode, 1986, episode 435, which I dub Gazebo Palooza, because Mark and Mason had a conversation at the gazebo. Mason and Mary had a conversation at the gazebo. Dylan and Nick had a conversation. Eden and Nick had a conversation. Cruz and Nick had a conversation at the gazebo. Who else had a conversation at the gazebo? Half the cast went back and forth, in and out. Pearl and Courtney. Pearl and Cruz, I think. Anyway, it's a wonder that they didn't have two consecutive scenes in the gazebo, but they pretty much went back and forth between the atrium and the gazebo. Let's start with the exciting one. Dylan tears the petals off the flowers and spreads them on the bed. I climbed in the window, says Dylan. I thought it would be romantic. He suggests she yells. The family will come running and they can tell them the good news about their impending marriage. Dylan starts towards her, and Kelly begins to have flashbacks of Peter Flint saying similar things and making similar motions. And she grabs the letter opener to threaten him with. So, yay, nice to see Peter Flint again. It's been probably over a year since he left the show. Maybe a little less. These were all different scenes from that time when, towards the end when Peter was psycho and saying soothing yet insanely crazy things to Kelly. Dylan says that night we had together started all of this. There was love. And then he does a 180 and says, is this what you do? Use men and then push them away, pit them against each other? Mason finally comes in, and Dylan says that Kelly invited him in. Kelly says, no, that's not true, and get rid of him. So Kelly leaves, and Mason has a brief but hopefully stern conversation with Dylan. Dylan says, I'm courting Kelly. And Mason says, well, do it in public places from now on. If you want to play Romeo so badly, join a stock company. So he is ushered out the back door, which we've never seen. But presumably that's how Santana gets into the house all the time. And Rosa. Dylan runs into Nick at the gazebo and tells him he just saw Kelly and will be seeing a lot more of her. Nick asks Eden not to tell Kelly that he's there. Eden finds Kelly packing her things. She says she's going to find another apartment. Now, it is quite late at night.
Yeah.
Eden asks if it's a little late, and Kelly says, I think I know where I can find one, which is a very odd thing to say. Then Kelly says, do you remember Peter? Which just sounded so funny in that context. I've been thinking about him. Maybe it's the rose. And Kelly leaves without her suitcase. So presumably she goes back and forth. But Eden is left to contemplate the two headless roses that are sitting there, the rose stems. Kelly does run into Nick on her way out and says, don't bother trying to stop me. I'm no good for you. Everything's changed for me. Kelly hangs out on the beach and hears saxophone music. So this is on her way to looking for an apartment. She thinks a beach stop is a good idea.
Anyway, it's like 2 in the morning.
2 in the morning.
Yeah.
Next thing we see, the landlord is showing Kelly a room that is full of stuff. The landlord says the previous tenant will be there in the morning to get it. And Kelly really likes the view of the ocean. So she got a 2 a.m. nice view apartment full of someone else's stuff. I have a suspicion that it's Sally's apartment on the beach that Kelly made her move into. And that Kelly phoned her and said, Sally, I need you out of there right away. I'm moving in. Take Bryony with you. I know you've been caring for him since Christmas. And and Kelly is waltzed in, and Sally didn't even have time to grab her stuff. It's really the only explanation. So the landlord also says that saxophonist sometimes forgets how late it is when he's practicing. Kelly says she likes it, but on his way out, the landlord knocks on the saxophonist's door, tells him to shut it down for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly goes to bed and turns off the light. Dylan appears at her window. He smashes the window and climbs in, and then he morphs into Peter. Peter! Screams Kelly. She turns on the light, and Peter is gone, and the window is not smashed. So I suspect this was newly shot footage with Stephen Meadows as Peter, because this clearly can't have been a flashback from anywhere.
It seems like Kelly is maybe being triggered and becoming a bit mentally unstable herself.
Because some of that last hallucination you might have been able to put that down to her being asleep, but she actually had those flashes of Peter early. I'm wondering if she's going to start seeing him when she's clearly awake. And I wonder if this is just really a follow-on from last year's headaches that never really got properly resolved.
Yeah. And remember all those scenes of her in the gazebo with her old doll and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think her ghost town therapy may have only been a temporary cure. And I think now that she's started to see a psychiatrist, she may pick a different one to continue with, but that may be where this is going, that Kelly's going to properly resolve these things.
I feel like this gives us another really good potential suspect if Dylan is murdered as well.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kelly thinking he's Peter?
Yeah, because she's already attacked him with the letter opener. Now, I tend to feel Dylan fully deserves that. But if she hallucinates him, if he comes to see her, I'm sure he'll track her down at some point and tries to court her again, and she thinks he's Peter. Or if she just even thinking he's Dylan might do it. She could attack him.
And I mean, there's always the landlord who might see some guy skulking around there. Our saxophonist might think it's a burglar and do him in with a reed.
I'll be interested to see how our meeting with the saxophonist goes. I mean, maybe that's another potential suitor who could put the whole Hartley Brothers thing behind her.
Now, of course, I remember the saxophonist, and he's going to be showing up, I think, probably in the next episode. The weird thing is about this, I was convinced that all of these scenes of Kelly in her new apartment took place in New York, from when I remembered it 35 years ago. I think I must have conflated the fact that she was constantly saying, I'm going to New York, and then suddenly she had this new apartment, and we only ever saw her hanging out with the saxophonist and none of the other characters. I just somehow felt in my head that had all taken place in New York. But then again, I probably didn't see every episode this month, although I would have only had 4 finals. So I probably saw a lot of them. But yeah, somehow in my head that got mixed up, and I thought that all the scenes in Kelly's new apartment were actually a place in New York that she had. Yeah, so excited to see the saxophonist come back. In recent years, he's played a priest on Days of Our Lives, and we'll talk more about him when we first see him. Kelly specifically told Eden, I will tell you where I am, but I don't want you to tell anyone else, not even Dad. So I somehow have a bad feeling she's going to tell Dylan. Eventually, either accidentally because she'll say it to Cruz or something while Dylan is skulking in the rose bushes, or I think Eden will be the source of how Dylan finds Kelly.
Which may not be in Dylan's interest if she ends up stabbing him to death.
I know, it may be in our interests to finally get rid of him.
Yeah.
Cruz overhears Nick tell Eden that he has some news on her case. Eden tells Nick that Kelly regrets losing him and wants him back. Nick pretty much shuts down that line of help. Nick tells her that his research has shown that Capwell Enterprises has an account with the speaker store. And there was an order placed 6 weeks ago. And here's the paper receipt. It wasn't put through the normal way. It was paid cash. Eden pretends not to recognize the handwriting. And later she brings Nick a note and asks if he thinks it's the same handwriting. And Nick asks if it's Kirk's. He says he's basically suspected from the beginning that he's been investigating Kirk.
So another person who's actually a better investigator than Cruz.
He says he's worried about her safety. And Eden says, if the same danger happens again, I'll be prepared for it. So I wonder if she's got like a gun in her purse.
Maybe.
We may see Dylan stabbed and Kirk shot all in the same week. Nick tells Eden that he's leaving Santa Barbara after he finishes Eden's case. And that kind of goes to with what I was saying, that there's really no other stories tying Nick to anyone in Santa Barbara, really.
Plus, I think he's getting fed up with running into Dylan every other day. Things are getting pretty poisonous between them, and Kelly's just a reminder of what he can't have. So, I mean, in many ways, that decision does make sense.
The only thing I can contemplate is Nick and Janice running into each other at buzzes and maybe drowning their sorrows, their similar sorrows together.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see Janice again. And, I'd really like to see her and Mary have a conversation when Mary's gotten a little bit more wise to Mark.
Yeah, I think she's a good resource for Mary to seek out. And Cruz tells Eden he doesn't think she's safe. She says because of David, because they've all been, thinking about the murder, and it's actually the reverse of the last time someone mistaked Kirk when they were talking about David. But he says no, not because of David. And then, this is another one of those where people swap places. And then in the gazebo, Cruz tells Nick, I'm sending you to New York to look into David's alibi. And he tells Nick that he thinks maybe that explosion that injured Mark might have been meant for Eden. Then Cruz runs into Eden as she rushes out the door. Kirk is rejecting his new heart. She just got a call. She has to race up to Stamford. Cruz tells her once again he's concerned, and she says that she's not his responsibility. And then she has a really weird kind of turn where she goes, someday I'll tell you the whole story, and you're going to tell me what a fool I was, and I'll say it was for you. And if we're lucky, we'll go on from there. So she's kind of, waxing poetic on her theory that someday she and Cruz will end up together again after a torturous route, which pretty much summarizes all soap opera love stories.
Well, she also says to him, she says, an hour ago, I might have told you everything, but, basically that's beside the point now. So you've got to imagine Cruz is standing there thinking, what happened in the last hour that changes everything?
And I'm guessing it's the fact that maybe Kirk's going to die again.
Yeah.
Cruz asks David if he thought Madeline was involved with another man. He says no. He asks if he knew Madeline was planning to divorce him. He says no. Cruz says Madeline's lawyer told him that. And David says, Simpson, he's lying. Which is kind of dumb because that can easily be checked. Cruz asks where he was in the week before Madeline's death. He says, I was in Hong Kong and then Boston and New York. Cruz says, well, I know you were in Santa Barbara the day before the murder. And David immediately says, did Courtney tell you that? So that's somewhat interesting. I wonder if he spotted Courtney that day.
Yeah.
So he finally admits that he saw Madeline in the bungalow that day and that she asked him for a divorce. So Cruz says all these lies don't really help your case. So Cruz wants the receipts, the MasterCard receipts. He says, oh, I paid all my airline tickets in cash. Well, do you have the boarding passes? No, I don't keep stuff like that. So Cruz asks if he can search David's luggage. And he says, I could get a warrant, but why don't you just let me? So David does, and he finds cufflinks, but notes that all of David's shirts have buttons, including the one he's wearing. And David says that he just packed them out of habit. And Cruz suggests the alternative is that there is a missing shirt, possibly covered with blood. When Courtney asks David if he still plans to leave tomorrow, he says Inspector Castillo told him to stay in town. So David reminds Courtney that he never took advantage of Madeline's wealth and that all he ever did was love her. And Courtney apologizes for having behaved badly towards him. So I don't know if she's starting to think that maybe he is the killer now that all the evidence is out that points to him being the killer. I don't know. But she softened slightly. Maybe it was just that she was having a nice evening with Pearl in the gazebo most of the day.
It did occur to me, this is probably a difference between the mid-'80s and now. There would really be, I think, no way someone could just anonymously slip on and off a plane.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from the multi-levels of security you have to go through, there's cameras everywhere, there'd be video footage, everything's done electronically. So that's definitely a plot point that wouldn't hold up very well now.
They do have passenger lists, though, although at that time you could fly under a fake name and it wasn't illegal as long as you weren't flying across an international border. But that would actually not help. Not help him if he said, I flew under a fake name, because then Cruz would just say, oh, okay, we'll look for that name then on the passenger list. So I suspect we'll see Cruz looking through passenger lists tomorrow.
I think so too. Yeah.
Mark tells Mason that his little scheme didn't work. Mary and I are closer than ever. Mason says, pity's a poor substitute for love. And Mark almost hits Mason. Mason says, that seems to be your style, and says, if you do anything to hurt Mary, I'll declare her back on limits. Mark tells Mary about all the stupid people he knows who want to have children. Now, Mary actually is quiet during this whole diatribe against people having children, because it's clear she and Mark had never talked about having children, and that kind of the default, at least in 1985, was that people who got married expected to have children. So I think this may be another huge thing, because Mary suddenly told that her husband doesn't want to have children out of the blue.
Well, and I think also for her, especially being a devout Catholic, I mean, she was devout enough to become a nun, that that would
probably thinking of having 10 kids.
Yeah, well, she probably has at least a fairly traditional expectation of marriage. So, and the conversation, it's funny. It just sort of comes out of the blue. I don't know if Mark is maybe trying to dampen expectations because he knows that sex is not going to be a possibility in their lives for a while, or if
it's weird to go right to we're never going to have kids.
Yeah. Or if this is just, another step in the decline of their relationship.
Or he was, trying to use it as a wedge to get her to, in case that was her next argument. So Mark says he's going to go to bed, and Mary says, well, I'll join you. He goes, second thought, I'll stay up and pay some bills while you go to bed. And then she says, well, in that case, I'm going to go for a walk. And then he says, oh, okay, I'll go to bed right now then. Hope you don't mind if I'm asleep when you get home. So, of course, Mary runs into Mason at the gazebo. And Mason tries to join her on her walk, but she declines. And says, Mark will be expecting me. And Mason says, you just said he was asleep. So anyway, she returns home, and as she gets into bed, it looks like she contemplates waking Mark, but then changes her mind and lays down with her back to him. So very sad. Another sad day for Mary in her marriage.
So, of our three recent marriages on Santa Barbara, we have two couples where the husbands are actively trying to avoid their wives. That would be Cruz and Santana, and, Mary and Mark. And we have the third marriage where the wife is actively hoping her husband dies.
Mm-hmm. What was the last marriage before that? Brick and Amy, right? That one's going well.
Yeah, that one's going pretty good. So that's the good one so far.
I wonder what the next marriage will be. It's not going to be Kelly and Dylan, I'm pretty sure. Unless she goes so crazy that she thinks Dylan is her lover. That would be a weird turn for her craziness.
I feel like she would have to be hallucinating that he's Joe Perkins at this point rather than
which could happen.
Peter Flint.
Yeah, I remember little bits and pieces about that storyline. So, but I don't remember. I doubt she would hallucinate Joe because I didn't see either of the Joes in the cast list, ever again. So, Pearl and Courtney hang out in the gazebo talking about David, and he starts talking about. I think he's trying to get the conversation back around to love, but she's kind of like says, "Oh, I'm, all I can think about is David right now," and she's kind of shaken by everything because it's just finally all starting to hit her. And so he tells a story about he was a hermit once himself, and until he saw how in love Cruz was with Eden, and so I think his plan is for her to, want to date him. And Pearl says, "You suspect my motives?" Courtney says, "A little," and Pearl says, "That's okay. It's probably even smart." She smiles at that, and they go to the beach for a while. This is actually the same spot on the beach that Kelly goes to, but it's actually earlier. Courtney says she wishes they'd met before all this. He says he never attended any Harvard mixers, and she wouldn't have looked at him twice anyway, let alone let him kiss her. And then she kisses him. That may have just been the awkward angles they were at. Maybe the intention was for him to kiss her, but in the end, she's the one who had to go up to kiss him. Back at the Capwell mansion, he asks if she wants him to come inside. She says, "I don't think that's a good idea, but I'm glad you followed me home tonight." Pearl says, "Maybe I'll follow you again sometime." So I don't think that's a good idea. Usually means I'm worried about what might happen, I think, in this case. So I like Courtney and Pearl as a couple.
It's going to be really interesting to see how all these relationships between Pearl and all the various other folks in the cast shake out when his real identity does become. Not that we entirely know it ourselves, but we know it's quite different than what he's presenting to the rest of the cast.
Ironically, it would have been Madeline who was the most shocked by it.
Yeah.
That is finally it. So that was a lot of stuff happened, and much of it in the gazebo. But that was for a Monday episode. So we'll meet the saxophonist tomorrow, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's not tomorrow. I'm not sure. Maybe Kelly doesn't actually appear for a few days now. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think we don't see her again till Friday. So I guess Cruz's investigation of David would be the big thing, and Eden hemming and hawing at the hospital about Kirk. But I mean, really there aren't too many options for what happens at the hospital. So he's stabilized, he's getting worse, or he's getting better.
Well, I'm thinking at some point too, we're going to have some sort of action back at the casino where Brick is going to be discovering just all of the fraudulent behavior that Dylan has been engaging in.
I mean, I wonder if Brick will call Sam over to see if he knows anything about some weird anomalies that he discovers or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we haven't seen any of the Lockridges. We haven't seen Warren for ages. The other two Lockridges, we might see them again. Haven't seen Minx for a while.
Yeah. And Lakin's up in Tahoe, apparently. So.
And Amy usually just hangs around asking Brick if he's got time for lunch. So that's her role on the show, relegated to hanging out with her husband at work. So weird that the Perkinses have been so sidelined, and even the Andrades, Rose is barely seen, and it's only Santana that we see. And that is it for episode 435. We will be back after we've watched episode 436. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Was Kirk's doctor at Stanford Medical Center. He's rejecting the heart.
You hear that, sweetheart? I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna live. I told you I'd never leave you alone. The doctor said that this heart of mine stopped for a few moments. For a few moments, I was dead.
Just don't think about it.
Well, it's okay. I knew I'd come back to you, sweetheart. Nothing's going to keep us apart anymore. I'm going to be okay, sweetheart. I'll be coming home with you. Everything will be just like it was. I promise you.
Welcome back
Hello.
to the world's most beloved Santa Barbara podcast. We watched episode 436, which originally aired Tuesday, April 15th, 1986. You watched it last night, did you? I watched it earlier today. Allie Walker in a nice and easy ad was presented to us before the show started as a preview. She will be playing Andrea Bedford in a few years. And then there was also an ad for this week's Santa Barbara. Will a confession of love bring a confession of murder? So that was Eden and Cruz chatting from this episode. So I don't know who's going to confess to murder. I doubt Kirk will. He didn't kill anyone. So this episode is called A Rose for Rosa. Rosa starts her day by opening the door at 7 a.m. to Dylan Hartley, wearing a super ugly red shirt with white stripes, crisscrossing stripes.
It was very 80s, I have to say.
I thought maybe he thinks it makes him look like someone who might play polo.
I feel like it's something he was attempting to look, I don't know, more
look like the idle rich might dress.
Yeah, exactly.
But not quite getting it right, I suspect.
Yeah, I think this would have been the era when people had those little crocodile sweaters and that, and polo shirts and rugby pants. So I think this was his version of that.
Maybe the wardrobe people thought, we'll put him in failed Peter Flint. That's what we'll go for.
Yeah.
He's brought a pink rose for Kelly, which obviously he swiped once again from the Capwell rose bush right outside the front door. When Rosa tells him Kelly's not there, he demands to know where she is. And Rosa says she doesn't know and probably wouldn't tell him if he did. If she did. He gives her his card and says, call me when you find out where Kelly is. She literally just told you she wasn't going to tell you where Kelly is. And he gives her the rose. Oh, but if he were clever like Mason, he would say a rose for Rosa, but he's not clever. Dylan meets Augusta at the Orient Express and asks how she's getting on with her new boss. She says she and Brick are thick as thieves, but Dylan says, oh, I meant CC. And he casually tries to find out from Augusta if Kelly's at the casino. And Augusta says that he should do his own spying. So it's a lot of mosquitoes out here or something. So it's very obvious to her that He doesn't know where Kelly is, but he's pretending he knows where she is.
Mhm.
He says the reason Kelly and Nick called off their wedding is that he and Kelly have been having a secret affair for months. Augusta laughs. You and Kelly. So she says, I think God made the Capwells to make my life seem more normal. She suggests that he ask Abel where Kelly is and indicates Nick sitting at another table. Now, Cain killed Abel, so hopefully Dylan will not be killing Nick.
Mhm.
Dylan pretends to be in contact with Kelly and tells Nick that Kelly's fine. Nick says, she never called you. I don't believe you for 1 minute. And Dylan said, if you'd given her up at the beginning, you could have saved us all this trouble. And Nick says, leave her alone, or I will see to it that you'll regret it. He says it kind of low key, but I highlighted it because we're racking up murder suspects. CC threatened him yesterday. Lionel.
Yeah, by my count, I'm trying to think of all the people who Dylan has squabbled with over the last few weeks. And I think we've got Brick, we've got Sam, we've got CC, Mason yesterday. He and Lionel get into a bit of it today. Nick, of course. Kelly's already gone after him with a letter opener. So yeah. And even Augusta, it was pretty testy between the two of them today.
Yeah, this wasn't an amiable conversation. Well, Lionel shows up angry with Dylan for selling his shares to CC, even though he had promised that he would beat any offer that CC made. So I don't think that's quite a murdering motive, but, this could escalate.
Yeah.
Dylan says Lionel should be happy that his son Brick is now top dog. Nick brings some more of Kelly's things over to Sally's apartment, only to find Dylan there in his ridiculous sweater, redecorating. Dylan says, oh yeah, Kelly wants me to get the apartment fixed up for her. So that's super creepy.
Also, it didn't take them long to find her, did it?
What do you mean? No, that's Sally's apartment.
Oh, that's not where.
That's Mason's old apartment where Kelly lives. When she's not, before she moved back to the Capitol Mansion.
Okay. The mattress looked very similar to the grotty old one she was sleeping on.
No. This is Sally's place. The furniture looks a bit different though. So I think I don't think the wicker was there anymore, the wicker couch. So I think something's been replaced. But presumably, possibly Kelly did that when Mason and Ted moved out. I don't recall them. I don't quite recall them moving out, and I don't quite recall why Kelly moved back to the mansion. But there's some stuff in there that's not Sally's anymore. There's a lot of wicker and rattan furniture, and like even the shelving, I think, was that style. And now it seems more like the gross stuff my parents have in the basement right now.
Okay, that makes more sense then. What's interesting, both Hartley brothers went to her old apartment, assuming she'd be there. I guess that they really don't know where else to go.
Although, interestingly, I don't know if this is a writing error, but at one point Nick says to Dylan something like, if you don't stop this, she'll move a lot further away than across town. So that's almost like they know she just moved somewhere in town. But
yeah, that confused me too.
Although the beach, well, maybe it's not the same beach, but we know the beach is only a 20-minute drive from Park Lane or whatever it is, where the Capwells live and the Lockridges. Nick says when she sees what you're doing here, she's going to take off again. Nick returns later with more boxes to find that Dylan has stopped working on the apartment. So I didn't quite really see a difference between the two scenes, but it definitely seems different from Sally's look. He spots a note for Kelly leaning against the window. So he opens the window and blows on the note so it flies out.
It's actually interesting that Nick is in so much of this episode because, of course, at the end of last episode, we had Cruz asking him to go to New York.
Mhm.
So it's apparently a later flight that he's taking.
I guess he's tying up loose ends by having lunch at the Orient Express. Augusta overhears Lionel making dinner reservations for two. Augusta asks who his new playmate is. He says he's not going to play this old game and doesn't answer. Cece arrives and the maitre d' tells him that Mr. Hartley wants to see him. Cece says, which Mr. Hartley? Augusta gleefully tells him that she thought Dylan and Nick were going to draw swords to see which one was going to contact Kelly first. And then she tops it up with, I understand Dylan and Kelly are going to be bringing their affair out in public. Cece says, stay out of my family's business. Augusta has a little more to tell Cece. She says, Lionel's meeting someone for dinner at 7. And Cece says, I can guarantee you it won't be Sophia. And then the maitre d' tells Augusta that Lionel's reservation has been moved to 8 o'clock. Not quite sure what the whole point of that 7 to 8 o'clock thing is, because it never really makes a difference as far as I can tell later in the show. Santana finds Cruz staring out the window in the middle of the night and tells him she loves him. He responds, I'll be in a second. They later discuss the fact that Santana's feelings for Cruz are much stronger than the other way around. She even says, I've tried to avoid saying I love you for the last few weeks because I knew you wouldn't say it back. And after that discussion, Cruz says that Kirk might not make it. And Santana looks worried for the wrong reasons. Cruz says he doesn't think Gina would have acted alone. Rosa visits Santana to tell her about Kirk and ask how Brandon is doing. And during that whole scene, Santana is clearly holding on to the delusion that she, Cruz, and Brandon are going to make the perfect family. Because I think we can all see it slipping away. And she's desperately trying to, will into existence the future that she's picturing. And I don't know, Rosa kind of volleys back and forth with her a little bit, but Rosa doesn't necessarily fall down one side or the other, but she says, Cruz was always your dream. And Santana says, and Eden was his. And Rosa's only comment is, no marriage is easy. So she's being very neutral. She's not supporting Santana because I think she knows so much could go wrong, but she's not going to say, just give up on Cruz because, well, she's Catholic. So now that they're married, they should probably stay married forever. And also, probably to some extent, Santana, she thinks Santana and Cruz are a good match. Because if it weren't for Eden, that could be true.
Also, I think she realizes that Santana needs to be married to Cruz to keep Brandon.
Well, I don't know if that's really necessary. I mean, now that she has him, I don't see how Cece could take him away. I suspect in a few weeks, Santana will be visiting Mason to see if there's anything in the agreement that she can't divorce Cruz, or get an annulment even. It's not clear if they're sleeping together. I thought they were. And Brandon's comment seemed to imply they were. So maybe they are.
Have. I mean, it's not a Mark and Mary situation.
No, it's just that he doesn't love her. He just likes sleeping with her.
And they're kind of
dutifully sleeps with her.
Irritating each other.
Kirk is hallucinating and talking about the night Gina tried to kill Eden. Eden is trying to understand and make up what he's saying, but the doctor keeps pulling her away and then makes her leave so he can administer another drug.
Yeah, the doctor is kind of interrupting things.
He's all into medicine and she's all into murder solving. They are at cross purposes. The doctor mentions he's been given as much of the anti-rejection drug as they can give him. So now they're giving, I think, anti-hallucinogenic drugs or something to bring down whatever other issue he's having. Nick tells Eden he's on his way to New York. And he says, I hope Kirk pulls through. Cece and Sophia show up to support Eden and Kirk. Sophia asks Eden what's really going on, but she won't say. She says, my husband's dying and I'm thinking of someone else. The doctor comes in with the great news that Kirk has rallied and will make a full recovery. Eden tells Cruz. Cruz says, then why are you still crying? Eden tells Cruz he was right. It wasn't Gina's idea to kill her. It was the same person who sent the notes. Someone jealous. Cruz realizes it was Kirk. They hug, just as Kirk is wheeled back into the room. Kirk says, hear that, sweetheart? I'm going to live. I told you I'd never leave you alone.
So between Kirk and Dylan, we've got a pretty major creepiness factor going on in this episode.
Yeah, the Capwell sisters.
Yeah.
Are having no form of luck. And then Mary, of course, is in kind of a weirdly similar situation.
Now, I'm assuming the planes are running a bit more frequently today because Cruz pops up there without very much problem.
Mm-hmm.
We see Sophia and Cece up there, and then they're both have popped back to Santa Barbara
Very
by
quickly.
the middle of the episode. Now it's possible that they both flew their own planes up there, but
When I was doing my summer, I couldn't quite remember if Nick flew up there or if he phoned her.
you mean Cruz?
No, Nick. When Nick
Oh,
tells her he's going to New York, I don't actually remember if he actually did make a physical appearance or if it was on the phone. Cece and Sophia talk while they're at the hospital waiting for news. He says that Kelly's acting like a child. And Sophia says, well, a child would have gone through at the wedding. So, and then Cece invites Sophia for dinner at the mansion. Sophia agrees, as long as he doesn't start on that Sophia and Lionel stuff again.
Mm-hmm.
Rosa sets a romantic table, and Cece arrives and says, we're not entertaining the Reagans tonight, implying that they sometimes do entertain the Reagans,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool to, be able to mix real world stuff in, considering they're a wealthy Santa Barbara family, it really makes sense.
Well, and it actually would make a lot of sense because, of course, Ronald Reagan had been the governor of California, so he would have mixed with people like C.C. Capwell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rosa says, well, this is the first time Sophia has dined here for a long time. She's forgetting the red wedding. I mean, the Mason's dinner. Cece asks her to at least remove the candles. Augusta comes over with some certificates that go with Cece's paintings and gives him the news that Lionel and Sophia are right now having a meeting in the gazebo. Cece smashes a vase and tells Rosa to clear off the table. At the gazebo, Lionel and Sophia are meeting because Lionel needs to borrow money from Armonte. He still has the offshore oil rights to the property that Cece stole that he can use for collateral. Well, Mason stole it for Cece, I guess. So that's an interesting twist. I don't know if Mix is too happy about oil drilling. Well, I guess having oil rights and not using them is actually an environmentally friendly thing to do because you're stopping someone else from spilling oil into Santa Barbara Harbor or whatever it's called.
Well, and one of the things that comes out, Sophia sort of says to him, how did you get yourself in such terrible financial straits? And I guess my assumption is that Lionel has been managing the family finance portfolio after Brick left and has not been doing a very good job of it.
I think that he said he had to borrow a lot. Well, I mean, he was trying to pay off all these people to buy Cece's art collection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to buy his own art collection back. But Cece ended up being the one who paid the money. So I don't know what other amounts of expense he would have had then. Maybe just the general expenses of running the Lockridge estate, which, as we know, was sort of already floundering before Brick took over.
Well, I imagine it did cost him a certain amount to invest in the casino initially to put the money up for that.
Oh, that's right. So all his money's tied up in there. So hopefully when it burns down, he has insurance. That would be terrible. I don't know if a company would insure something that's 12 miles offshore. Well, I guess shipping companies have insurance. So anyway, Sophia agrees to lend him the money. But this is an interesting mention again of Armonti Industries. We haven't heard about for a while. Sophia's still running it in her spare time when she's not hanging out at the Orient Express or the Capwell Mansion. We don't know anything about what kind of board of directors there might be, or if there's any other Armonti family or anything. But they're keeping it in play anyway.
Yeah.
Augusta can't quite hear what Lionel and Sophia are saying at the gazebo, but she sees them part with a handshake. And so I think she had enough, heard enough words that she got the gist that it was a business meeting. But Sophia arrives for dinner and Cece tells her, oh, it's off. I have to work. And she sees he's lying and leaves angry with him. Augusta phones to say, I was wrong. Lionel and Sophia were having a business meeting. So Cece tells him if he catches her spying again, he'll call the police. At the Orient Express, Augusta is sitting at Lionel's table when he arrives for his dinner, and he actually tells the maid Radi it's just one. So I don't know who the mystery second person was, or if he somehow planned to encounter Augusta there the whole time. She tries to give him her shares of the casino. I guess she has half of his 40%. So clearly she caught the gist that he was in financial difficulties.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she just had a soft heart or she didn't want him bound to Sophia. And she figured
probably both.
Yeah. But anyway, he says he won't take them. So she takes them back. But he says, what you can do for me is have dinner with me. And she agrees if they can start with their usual, a bottle of Dom Perignon 74. So I think they're maybe rekindling things after all.
I feel like they are a little bit.
No, I feel like there's still a potential for Sophia to, show up with Lionel at the wrong time, and Augusta could freak out again. But
yeah.
Maybe Julia will help Lionel. But this could be a slow storyline of them courting for a while. No need to rush things. Still interesting that Augusta and Cece are having so many scenes together. They're actually quite fun. So I wonder if the writers are still thinking about the possibility that something could happen with them.
They are fun. I mean, because in some ways they have similar traits. They're both sort of shameless in a lot of ways, and they do play off each other very well, I think.
And she's not a real Lockridge, so she's not really part of the feud.
Yeah.
Oh, sure is a lot of traffic at 8 p.m. in this cul-de-sac that I live in. That is it. Sort of a lot happened in this, or at least there were a lot of good lines that I managed to write down.
I think the really, big reveal, if you'd like, or the big thing that moves us forward in this episode, which is the one that was in the promotions as well, is that Eden has finally told Cruz that it was Kirk who was responsible for attacking her. And I think, while they're having that conversation, Cruz starts to put together the pieces for her and says, whoever did this to you was probably responsible for what happened at the cabin as well.
That's right.
And you can just see by her face that suddenly she's realizing just how much danger she has been in and will possibly be in again.
Yeah, she hadn't thought about this at all. So
yeah.
Yeah, hopefully she'll relate to him soon exactly what Gina said to her, because that will really let Gina off the hook quite a bit. And Cruz, I mean, even though Gina's thought dead, Cruz won't be focused so much on that part of it, and may even try to figure out a way to, clear Gina's name posthumously or at least tell the Capwells, hey, we don't think Gina was really, but he can't really tell the other Capwells without the risk of Kirk overhearing, right? So
Yeah, and he doesn't really have solid evidence at this point. I mean, he's just got the thing from the electronics store that Nick has found.
well, maybe he could say something to Haley, and then does Haley know Gina's alive? Yeah.
But he
So,
doesn't know that Haley is related to Gina.
oh, you're right. So, well, we'll see. We'll see. There's some way they have to bring.
I feel like they think Gina's dead. So, if Eden tells them that Gina gave him the warning, yes, that does clear Gina's name. But as far as they're concerned, Gina's dead. So I think the big priority will be to keep Eden safe.
Well, I'm wondering.
Nice to know information, but
At some point, Gina will have to, be known to be alive. I'm just trying to figure out a way for it to happen while Kirk is still, just under suspicion, or if Gina will have to wait until it's somehow revealed that Kirk was behind it, before she can reveal herself. It seems like a long time to interact only with Haley.
well, I feel like Eden and Gina will both be in a great deal of danger if all of this does not unfold when, in a timely manner, because once Kirk recovers, he will be, that'll be a threat to him.
I think maybe Gina and her outfit will try to visit Kirk either in Stanford, or if he gets moved back to Santa Barbara Hospital, or if he gets moved back into Mason's room to finish recovering. And that maybe there's an opportunity there for Eden to discover her, and they could actually have a conversation about things. So that would be interesting.
But interestingly enough, at this point, Gina and Eden are almost working a little bit at cross purposes, because Eden would, more than anything, like Kirk to be dead and gone. Gina needs him to be alive to tell everyone that she didn't do it, or to corroborate that.
Yeah. But you never know what Kirk's going to say, right?
Exactly.
Didn't
makes him so dangerous.
Was it Peter who made up some stuff on his deathbed that one time?
Yeah.
But, then it turned out he was lying because he wasn't really dying. All right, that is it for episode 436. Next episode is a Wednesday episode. And Diane was asking me before this if I remember this episode. And I don't remember any of the visuals of this. What are the odds that this would be one of the days in April when I would be having one of my 4 exams? I don't know. But I guess there were no memorable visuals, like, something that would burn into my brain. So the chances are that I did see this episode originally. All right, we'll be back after we've watched episode 437. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 437 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, April 16th, 1986. Now, you watched this a couple of days before me, and you thought it was kind of dull, but when I watched it, there was a ton of stuff that I found exciting, even though it was a Wednesday. Ted waxes his surfboard. Almost time for summer. It's only mid-April. Santa Barbara teen scene, summertime fun time. Santa Barbara teen scene, summertime fun time. Santa Barbara teen scene, summertime fun time. Summertime. And tells Haley he's going to take her surfing. But she says she's got other plans. And Ted seems to think of this as a rejection. Cece tells Ted that Haley at least has the good sense to know that she and Ted shouldn't mix.
So, same old snob.
I was hoping you'd be a little wiser than Channing was. Ted says, I won't let you do what you did with Channing. And Cece says, I hope you don't pursue her just to make that point. I would hate to think that Haley would have to look for another position. So, of course, Ted says it's like they never had their talk at all the other day when they came to an agreement that Cece would not meddle. Ted follows Haley and finds her at Angel's apartment. Haley says it's a female friend's apartment, but then Angel comes home, and Angel pretends that she works for him once a week as a cleaner. So it's interesting because I didn't know if Angel would back up her story or blow it, but
It was quick thinking on his part, actually.
Mm-hmm. Gina nearly runs into Ted and is angry that Haley let him follow her. No, that Haley let him follow her? Yeah, that's right. Later, Ted apologizes to Haley for following her, and she makes it clear that she doesn't have a boyfriend. And they end up spending the afternoon on the beach, and Ted kisses her on the beach. And that was a location shot with audio, I believe, because I think I heard Haley giggle. Wasn't any dialogue, but I heard seagulls, of course, overlaid, but I think I heard Haley laughing. Kirk awakes to find Cruz in his room. And they just have a little scene of animosity there where Kirk is trying to figure out why Cruz is there, if maybe he's about to be arrested. And Kirk says, I'm, investigating Madeline's death. He goes, I thought that happened in Santa Barbara. And then Cruz says, she made a phone call to Eden, and if I were Kirk, I'd go, that's a very tenuous reason to fly up to Stanford.
Yeah.
And then he finds out that Eden's flown back, and he says, you didn't manage to get a seat on her flight, did you? Angel sees Gina has a plane ticket for Stanford in the name of Juanita Gonzalez. So we now have a name for Gina's character.
Mm-hmm.
Juanita sneaks into Kirk's room. Kirk says, are you here to finish me off? And Gina says, calm down. After all, your delicate little lady's heart can't take it. And I was waiting for someone to make some sort of a joke like that. So I really thought it was quite fun that Gina is the first one.
I think that's going to really bother Kirk because he's already mentioned his horror at getting a woman's heart. So I think if she keeps this up, which I'm sure she will, this is really going to get to him.
Yeah, they found a spot to needle Kirk with. They used to call him Mr. Capwell all the time, and now this will be his new thing.
Yeah.
Kirk says, I have a brand new heart in me, Gina. A Capwell heart. I'll never forget how you brought on my heart attack, and I intend to return the favor. So, Gina seems a little worried, but when she gets back to Santa Barbara, she calls Kirk on the phone and plays him the tape, and now he's the one who seems worried.
Which is actually a pretty tricky thing for her to do because she's trying to keep him alive to prove her innocence. But she's threatening him with this tape, which cannot be good for him as he is recovering from a heart transplant.
Mm-hmm. She should maybe back off until he's on his feet a bit.
I think so, especially considering his heart attack was caused by the last time she played tricks on him.
I mean, I think it was worth, the one visit to make sure he knows not to say anything. But I think she should back off until he's healthy at this point. David tries to convince Courtney that he didn't kill Madeline. David says Pearl's the one she should suspect. Cruz reads David his rights and questions him, and David admits he did hide his missing shirt, and an officer retrieves it from the beach where he hid it, and it is covered in blood. And David says that he did go into the apartment and found Madeline already dead, or as dead as everyone else thought she was before they found that glimmer of life in her. Pearl and Courtney are hanging out at the beach house, and Pearl guesses, having watched her, that Courtney was a swimmer. When Courtney tries to push him on his past, he clams up again. And luckily Cruz walks in to truncate that conversation, so Pearl doesn't have to continue. But I think Pearl's secret is going to come up pretty soon.
I think so too.
Too many people know something.
They know something's up with him, and I guess Julia's gotten the closest to actually finding out that there is a whole second side to him. But I don't think anyone knows the story yet, and we don't know the story either.
I wonder if they decide not to prosecute Pearl, whether David might investigate him on his own, just to try and, get something on him, whether or not David is the killer.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, if they do find something incriminating that does cause Pearl's trial to go forward, I imagine it will come up in court.
Mm-hmm. Lionel tells Warren that the casino has called in all his markers. We haven't seen Warren for a while, and now it's the worst possible time. Warren says it's none of his business. Lionel worries that he might be about to meet with a loan shark. Perhaps it's worse, because he's meeting with Cece. Warren is meeting with Cece Capwell. Augusta catches wind of this and tries to pay off Cece, but Cece says, oh no, that wouldn't be good for Warren to have his mother paying his debts. Oh, I think this is something he should do. I won't accept your money. And we just know that Cece has this mean streak in him that he wants to see Warren wriggling on the hook. Maybe he's still upset with things from years past. But yeah, he's shutting down all the possible avenues Warren might have. At the Orient Express, before meeting with Warren, Cece runs into Lionel, and he says, it's only a matter of time until you're down to your last penny. And if you can't afford lunch, I appreciate you freeing up the table. We need to accommodate our paying customers. Warren then meets with Cece, who offers to clear his debts in exchange for the land that Minx gave him. Now this, not only have we seen a recalling of the paintings that we thought they had dropped that storyline, now the land that Warren and Elizabeth Peel hit out on is coming back into play. Augusta and Lionel beg him not to give Cece the property, saying it'll destroy Minx. Warren buys a gun. Thoughts on Warren's plan with a gun?
Well, it can't be good.
Can't be good. $100 gun. So we will find out if, I wonder if Augusta and Lionel would go to Minx and say, listen, Warren's about to give away this land. You got to do something, and maybe Minx will have some way of stopping the sale. Maybe if she talks to Warren. But who knows what Warren's planning with that gun? He's going to rob a liquor store. He's going to have to hope they've had a very good day to make up probably hundreds of $1,000s in gambling debts. And that is it for this episode. Yeah, several very small scenes, but I think very interesting in their own right. And we'll be back after we watch episode 438. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Calm down. After all, your delicate little lady's heart can't take it.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 438 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, April 17th, 1986. Cruz handcuffs David and takes him downtown as the Capwells all give him dirty looks. Cece says, I've got to call the East Coast branch. It's kind of a fun line about this. Mason says, the press will love it. He's close enough to a Capwell. And Cece says he's not a Capwell, but if he murdered one, he'll hang for it. David rejects a lawyer hired by Grant as he feels any Capwell lawyer will try to railroad him into jail. He begs Julia to be his lawyer. Julia doesn't want to return to criminal law due to what happened in Phoenix. She spends a good part of the episode thinking about it, although she says no every time. So yeah, this is interesting that he thinks Grant might try to railroad him, because we didn't really get any sense of his relationship with his father-in-law until now, I guess.
I think we are getting shades, though, of way back in the beginning, the Joe Perkins situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, him feeling like he wasn't going to get a fair trial at the hands of the Capwells.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe David didn't do it. I mean, it just seems too obvious as he's the only suspect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, possibly David is the woman in the white dress that we saw leaving. Now that we know David was there just before Pearl went in, I still think that could be a twist.
Yeah.
I don't recall them. A drunk Mark encounters Mary at the Orient Express. They start to dance, but Mary quickly becomes annoyed and returns to their seats. She watches Mason dance, first with Linda, who I think might be one of Ginger's girls. At first I thought she might be a casino girl, but she said something about just dancing, so I thought maybe it was a Ginger girl. And then Mason dances with Julia, which I've been excited about, because I like Julia a lot better than Mary, personally. Apparently I'm in the minority in the world. Mary reveals to Mark that she knows he is impotent. And Mark makes Mary promise not to leave him. So they kind of end the episode on an up note, since it's all come out. It sounds like she's willing to wait.
Also, we know that Mary, with her promises and sort of her background of trying to hold vows, literally, when she was a nun. So I feel like this will definitely be something she does at least try to uphold. And I have a feeling that it will be Mark in some way who breaks the promise they're making to each other that will allow her to get out of it.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what happens in the storyline. I remember one thing, but I don't think it's related to this. So, after Julia leaves, Mason asks Augusta if she'll dance with the half of him that's not a Capwell. And she says, "Why do you always go for the unavailable women? We're too much alike. We'd kill each other." So,
it was really nice to see Mason and Augusta, because they are a lot alike. It was nice to see Mason and Julia. I also always enjoy the scenes with Mason and Gina, because all of these people you feel are somewhat at the same level and operating on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I like to see Mason with Augusta. And it's interesting that they broach the potential of a romantic thing, since Mason's single and Augusta's single. I think it's something we may have talked about a year ago or so. Augusta witnesses Julia turning down a date with an old friend as she browses a vacation brochure. And Augusta is annoyed with Julia for letting such a good opportunity pass, and is interested in the man herself. When Julia mentions that David wants him to be her lawyer, Augusta asks him about, Phoenix. Asks her about Phoenix and says, I think it's better if you just go on this vacation. Mason returns, having left for a while, and Julia says to him, "They've gone." Mason says, "Who?" "Mary and Mark." And Mason says, "Have you seen the DA?" We haven't heard about the DA for quite a while, Tony Patterson. And Julia says, "What are you going to do? Turn yourself in for carrying a torch?" Mason says, the DA has asked me to rejoin as a special prosecutor. So I guess whatever influence Cece had on the DA, I think that maybe time enough has passed, or maybe I wonder if Cece phoned the DA after Mason brokered that deal for him and says, "Okay, you can rehire him." That's always a possibility.
It's really exciting in either case, because I've always felt like this role really suited Mason very well. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see him back on the DA's team.
So that makes me sound like there will be a big, long trial scene with David, because that's what, Mason does best. I think if it was just a short thing, that wouldn't be worth the trouble. So we might see a few weeks of trial. He says, "I'm joining the David Laurent case." And he says to Julia, "Are we going to be opponents? Or will the pressure be too much?"
I have to say I would love to see them as opponents. I have some thoughts about what could happen. if she does end up taking David's case, we could have her manage to get David acquitted. But then Pearl, I think, is back in the spotlight because I think she has to throw the light on someone else. And this is actually something that Augusta brings up, and she says, you know, if you're so fond of Pearl, you're not going to be representing him if it comes back to him. And I'm still thinking this might be a way for Pearl's identity to be exposed if he suddenly finds himself in the thick of it with no potential lawyers, Mason working for the DA, Julia working for David. Then he's going to have to make that phone call to the ambassador's office to get someone to represent him.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I thought, well, maybe the case goes so poorly for Julia that she eventually has to just, as a last resort, try to point the finger at Pearl.
That's what I'm thinking. But, the other thing I was thinking, too, about exposing his background is that if Mason and perhaps even Julia try to make this case about him using this opportunity to kill Madeline because he was desperate to keep his job, all he has to do is show that he's actually pretty wealthy and influential. He doesn't need the job in actual fact. And that would destroy the case.
The other thought I have is if it goes back to Pearl, I guess the police aren't allowed to investigate a suspect if they've already arrested someone else. I think it's not considered. Well, I think the DA would think that undermines his case, right? So I had thought maybe at some point Cruz was going to find Pearl's secret apartment. But if David's on trial, they're not going to be looking in Pearl's apartment because the DA wouldn't let them do that. Although I could see Cruz doing it anyway. Remember when he broke into Lindsay Smith's place that one time? So he might end up going in there, but I don't think he can officially talk about what he's found.
Yeah, so I guess if I just look ahead, I could see a trajectory where Julia gets David off by pointing the finger at Pearl. Pearl gets on the hot seat and has to expose his identity, and at some point in that mix we find out who the real killer is.
Eden leads Cruz through the events at the boathouse, and they figure out where Kirk must have waited due to where Eden heard the squawking from the speaker, and they decided he probably had a rifle. Eden isn't sure if she heard a second shot or not, and I think we had such a bad copy we weren't even sure we heard the first shot. Cruz checks the likely trajectory and finds a bullet in the back wall of the boathouse. And Eden wonders if maybe Kirk's rifle had a silencer. But then Cruz says, perhaps this bullet is from when Kirk did a practice run.
So it's definitely premeditated at this point. I mean, obviously it would be anyway just the setup, but makes it even worse.
So back at home, Eden wonders what they're going to do if they can't solve the case before Kirk returns home. Cruz says, well, you'll have to stop living with him. I'm going to take care of you.
And one significant thing that just came up during this whole part of the episode is that Eden reiterates that what Gina told her. So they know now that it wasn't Gina at all who was trying to kill Eden.
Yeah, that was good that came out apparently. I guess she must have told him in the car on the way to the boathouse because it's something she repeats at the boathouse. Cruz is so excited about the possibility of Kirk going to jail that he says something like, oh, then we can be together, or something similar to that, completely forgetting that he has a wife that is expecting him home constantly. So I think Eden does pick up on it, but then keeps it to herself, so it's not to spoil the mood. And now my favorite thing of the episode, which I completely did not remember, even though it is pretty major. Although once it started, I started having flashes of memory. A man in a dry suit and a scuba mask boards the casino ferry and hides. Brick brings the day's receipts on board, noting that the helicopter mysteriously broke down this afternoon. But they have a Brinks truck waiting on the shore. Amy and Sophia and a guard accompany the money while Brick gets off the ferry before it leaves to return to work. Just before they dock, the man in scuba gear jumps out and pulls a gun on the guard and grabs the satchel of money. As he leaps off the boat, the guard manages to shoot him. Brick ends up coming to the shore as the police investigate, and Brick and Amy actually have a discussion about maybe Brick quitting his job, because Amy says the next robbery might be a group of armed men bursting into your office. As Sophia and Amy describe the robber to the police, Sophia suddenly remembers that there was something familiar about the man's voice. The scuba diver surfaces inside a boathouse, bleeding heavily. He removes his mask. It is Warren Lockridge. He hides the money in a barrel and collapses from loss of blood. So I thought that was a really fun thing for Warren to do today, although I don't know how good it will be for his future episodes. After a couple of weeks of coasting and not being on the show, he suddenly does something really fun.
Yeah, and I think Sophia will eventually place the voice, and of course she also identified his very distinctive watch as well.
Oh, right, yeah. He said it was under 40, maybe even under 30, and that he was tall, so.
Yeah.
Also, gunshot wounds need to be reported to the police by hospitals, so I don't know where he's going to hang out. Plus, he's collapsed now. The other thing was the boathouse looked twice as big as the boathouse that Cruz and Eden were in. So I'm wondering if this is a different boathouse. And I just sort of have a vague memory now of 35 years ago being confused about boathouses too. Was this some boathouse at the marina that multiple people at the yacht club house their boats in? And so the Capwell speedboat and the Lockridge speedboat might be side by side normally. Or is this a different boathouse that the Lockridges have? There were two berths, one empty and one with a speedboat in it. I'm sure if I compared them properly, we could see. It just seems that they were definitely filmed from different angles each time. There were different barrels, piled in front of the camera. I just didn't recognize it as being the same place as the Capwell boathouse.
Yeah, I guess I had always assumed that the Lockridges and the Capwells had their own boathouses because they're old families. They've lived on the land a long time. They're wealthy. We haven't really heard of them belonging to a yacht club.
I would think the Capwell, both of their yachts probably would have to be docked at a yacht club. They would be too big to be in a boathouse unless they had a huge one.
But, as for smaller boats, I wouldn't necessarily think that they necessarily would be part of a yacht club as well.
Like, normally when I think of a boathouse, I think of it being attached to a waterfront property. And that each place would have its own. But the Lockridges, as far as I know, don't have any more waterfront property. So it's somewhat unclear. We'll see who shows up at this boathouse. If Lionel shows up with the scuba tank to take the boat out and finds his son lying there, then we'll know it's a Lockridge property.
And I think this will make for some kind of interesting scenes. I'm assuming someone will find Warren and that, he won't just bleed out and die, because I think the character will continue on. But it'll be interesting to see how this impacts the relationship between Sophia and Lionel, because I think she will be able to identify him. And then she's the only one who perhaps could, if Lionel's trying to protect Warren.
I wonder if Sophia would protect him too. I mean, it's a bit annoying to be held at gunpoint, so.
This is also, right now we're seeing, and it's really nice to see that Brick has completely embraced Sophia as his mother. And he's very protective of her. And, it's unfortunate that he and Warren have such an adversarial relationship. And I guess I just wonder how Sophia is going to feel about Warren not directly threatening Brick's life, but certainly threatening his wife's life in this.
I guess if Warren survives this, he'll have enough money to pay his debts without giving away that land.
Mm-hmm.
Last night I was thinking, I think if Warren gave Cece that land, I think Minx would finally snap, and instead of just, fending off various Capwell attacks, she might go on the offensive and, try to financially get back at the Capwell somewhere, because she could probably come up with some schemes of her own if she put her mind to it. Because, this is a constant barrage against the Lockridges by the Capwells for quite some time now.
Yeah, I would actually like to see Minx go full on the offensive against the Capwells, and I also wonder what she would do to her own family as well, because we know that Lionel is completely mismanaged and lost a lot of the fortune, both before Brick arrived and after.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that he has apparently lost the paintings to CC, which she doesn't know were fake, but, in her mind, those would have been a significant asset.
But they were paid for them. Augusta was paid for them. So.
Augusta was paid for them, but Augusta's not a Lockridge anymore. Right?
No, but it's the half, she took her half in paintings, which really benefited the Lockridges since they were actually worthless. If she'd taken the real estate and left the Lockridges with the paintings, they'd actually have nothing.
Yeah,
because they couldn't
that's
really
true.
sell them, without risk.
But either way, Minx doesn't know that. All
Mm-hmm.
she would see is that a big chunk of Lockridge assets have been taken because of this divorce.
Mm-hmm. I think Lionel's house of cards could collapse soon if Mink really starts, looking into what's left of the fortune.
Yeah, and then if Warren had sold the land, I'm just not sure Minx would be really that forgiving of her own family either. I mean, she just might turn around and leave everything to Brick at that point.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Potentially Minx owns the house. I don't know. I can't remember if it was said. Who owns what? If there's a trust that has everything, or if there are some assets that are just Minx's. Well, that's it for a Thursday episode, and there's going to be a very exciting turn of events in Friday's episode, so I'm looking forward to watching that. We'll be back after we watch episode 439. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Another busy day of dodging responsibility.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished the week of Santa Barbara, week 90, with our Friday episode. Episode 439 originally aired Friday, April 18th, 1986. Kelly dreams of Peter chasing her with a knife. Peter morphs into Dylan as Kelly runs around the Capwell atrium in her dream. Eventually, both Peter and Dylan advance on her. She wakes up screaming, and Dylan breaks down the door to come to her rescue. She's in room 12, we find out. Dylan tells her he followed Nick there. So, that's a shocker to me. I thought it was going to be weeks before Dylan tracked her down.
Can we mention that we were actually both right about Kelly's new apartment? Because
Yeah.
we were both, or I was certainly kind of confused when Kelly first got the apartment. I thought it was her new apartment, and I think I remarked that Nick and Dylan found it quite easily, and I think you said, oh no, that's her old apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was her new apartment.
Her new apartment. And somehow Dylan found it, which I guess because he had followed Nick there. And so that note that Dylan had left on the window that Nick blew away was actually in Kelly's new place. So if Nick hadn't done that, Kelly would have known earlier that Dylan knew where her new apartment was.
However, you were right, because her new apartment is in the same building.
It's in the same building, 2 floors up.
Yeah.
So she now has an ocean view. Now she's in room 12, so that means maybe there's four units on each floor. Could be 5, I suppose. Her door is on the left, just like in her old apartment. But if you remember, her old apartment was on the right of to the right of the hallway. We could see out the front window, but also that one time that guy broke in to kidnap Janice, we also saw through the back window. So there's only one apartment to the right of that central hallway. So if there are 4 on each floor, there must be another 3 apartments somehow weirdly on the left side, but we've never actually seen an opposite door across from Kelly's. But we have seen a little alcove where there's a phone, so presumably that's another hallway down which maybe the other 3 units are. And the reason I say this is because later, when we meet Justin, we'll find out that he seems to be climbing back and forth between apartments on the fire escape. So there must be an apartment adjacent to this one, even though we do see a hallway outside the window, outside the door, when she's first shown the apartment. So,
But anyway, now we know why Kelly found it so easy to get a new apartment in the middle of the night.
yes, she already had her landlord's phone number.
It was just in her old building.
And she said, I think I know where to get one. There might have been a notice or something in the lobby about that impending apartment coming up.
And now we know why. You know, we've just rented a place and, you know, it's weeks of screening tenants and going through paperwork. And now we can see why Kelly was able to completely skip that whole process.
But why didn't she go to her old apartment? Dylan's not living there. He's living at the Capwell Hotel. Nick's not living there. When Kelly moved in with Nick, all her stuff was moved out of the old place. So presumably it was empty. Did she really just want the better view, or did she really want a place that Dylan wouldn't be able to find her?
I suspect more the latter, unless Sally's moved back into the old one.
We'll never see Sally in the hallway. But anyway, Kelly is now 2 stories higher than she was before, and possibly facing in the exact same direction, because there is a hallway to her left, just like her old place. She never used to hear saxophone music from the old place, though, too. So the acoustics are better up here. So. Dylan tells her he followed Nick there. She imagines Dylan morphing into Peter and back. "You're just like Peter," she yells, and forces him out the door. Brick says that the casino has just had its worst day. He wants to close down for a few days, but Lionel doesn't think Cece will appreciate that. Sam thinks Dylan is the one who robbed the ferry. Brick says Dylan always used to say that on the oil rig they were beyond the reach of the law. Mason asks Dylan where he was last night, and Dylan says he was at Kelly's all night. That is when he reveals to us that Kelly only moved up 2 floors, which is kind of like what we did, except we moved up 25 floors. Mason says if he keeps bothering Kelly, a court order is next, and then prison. Dylan says, I need to know who Peter is. Mason says he went crazy a little while back. He tried to kill her. Yeah, he did kill 4 other women. And Dylan says, why? And Mason says, try the library.
I was surprised that Mason also didn't mention that he was Kelly's fiancé at the time, which might have been, you know, a little bit more of a warning to Dylan not to pursue his line of courting with her.
Later, Kelly's sink overflows, and her neighbor Justin, the saxophone player, climbs through the window. With his sax around his neck. That's the reason I think it's a fire escape, because if you were just scaling the walls,
It's quite a climb with
it's quite a climb with a sax around your neck. And I just, you know, maybe I'm wrong because I thought this was New York. Maybe that's why I thought it took place in New York, because that's where you expect fire escapes outside windows. But I seem to recall that for the next several weeks, he comes in that way every time, right? And that's right. I got that thought that he must live right next door. So. Anyway, she helps she and he fix the sink, and about an hour later, Mason arrives and is immediately suspicious of Justin, even though he still doesn't realize he climbed through the window, but he's already suspicious. What's a Justin Moore besides wet, says Mason. Justin says, what's a mason besides a bricklayer? Mason counters, if the Jazz Age ever comes back, we'll know where to look.
So if Jason has been living there this whole time, Justin, whatever, if he's been living there this whole time, then obviously he and Mason have never run into each other before. Either.
Well, Justin says to Kelly, oh, I remember you. You've lived here before, haven't you? So he did remember her from the hallway. So Justin actually says to Kelly, oh, I recognize you. You've lived here for a while, haven't you? And she says, oh, I was here before and I left and came back. So he was there before when she was there. Maybe it was just too cold to play saxophone. Kelly wonders how Mason knew where her new apartment was. And he says, oh, I ran into Dylan. So Dylan, now that he's found out where she lives, he's just telling everyone. And they have a nice scene together as well, as Mason almost tries to give some advice. He says, I care about you. I can't say that I've always liked you, but I care about you. At the Orient Express later, Dylan sneaks up on Kelly. I found out who Peter is. Kelly says, I'm warning you for the last time. Stay away from me. Another potential publicly witnessed threat that could be construed as a threat on his life if she's telling him for the last time. Warren regains consciousness on the floor of the Capwell boathouse. We find out much later when Sophia's on the phone with Brick and says, come to the Capwell boathouse. So, even though it looks much roomier than during Eden's attempted murder time, that is the Capwell boathouse. Why Warren picks that one to come up in is a different question.
All I'm thinking is that perhaps, having been shot, he just goes for the kind of nearest one.
Yeah, he is quite woozy throughout this episode. He's got a wound on his left shoulder. He hides the money and puts on his street clothes and realizes he has to meet Lionel in order to get the keys to the boat. Lionel gives them to him after just a little bit of cajoling, but Lionel wants him to stay for lunch. And I think Warren is most concerned with the possibility of perhaps passing out in the middle of the lunch, but he probably is anxious to get his money and run. But during that forced lunch, Sophia notices Warren's watch. Stands near the table for a few seconds to hear Warren's voice and realizes it was Warren's voice. Now, I have to say, even with the flashback they showed, there's no way that sounds like anyone's voice. It's just a guy shouting really loud in a very small, echoey place. So,
Also, I was kind of curious that she would be able to identify it because, remember, Sophia actually hasn't been around for most of Warren's life.
Have they ever had a scene together before?
So I wasn't quite sure how she would know Warren so very well.
Yeah, it seems suspicious. The watch might have been enough, really. She, of course, as people often do when criminals are around, follows him to the boathouse without telling anyone, and confronts him. She tries to get him to return the money and return himself in. At one point she said, you'll only get life in prison, which doesn't sound like a good trade-off. I wonder if she meant if you shoot someone, you'll get life in prison. But I'm not sure what the rules are for armed robbery. But since it was offshore, it seems like everything he's doing onshore is the only thing he could get arrested for. So he said, no, I need to just leave town with this money, and he he collapses once and she gets the gun away from him, but then later he lunges for it and gets it back and holds it on her. So really he's taken what could have been a reversible situation and really sort of, made it worse. He runs out with the money, and Sophia phones Brick and tells him that the robber is Warren, but begs him not to go to the police, to at least give her 24 hours to try to find Brick, and she thinks to try and find Warren, but she thinks Brick's the one who should try to talk him into giving up the money and surrendering. And Brick does agree to give 24 hours, but then they realize that the money is marked, and he's probably on his way to CC to pay it, and they both race off because they realize this is probably exactly what CC would love if it turned out the marked money from the casino robbery was being paid back to him. It's exactly what CC would like.
Yes, I think that this would just be beautiful leverage for CC to hold over not only Warren but the Lockridges. And remember, now Mason is back in the DA's office. He says temporarily. I'm actually hoping it'll be a little longer term than that. But so he now has this wonderful pathway right to the DA's office as well. So any threats he makes could definitely be substantiated.
Mason has a press conference to announce to the world his new position as temporary assistant DA, and he also mentioned that there's a new DA. Now that's interesting because we didn't have an election, and you would think since the DA was previously seen, they would have made a big thing about the election. Maybe Mason would have even have run for it himself. The only thing I can think of is that maybe Tony stepped down to his heart issues. His assistant DA took on the role of DA until they can have an election. And so this may be an intermediate posting.
Acting DA, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Julia asks him if the Capwell family is against David, the way David had said to her, and Mason says, well, yes, partly because Cruz, is pretty good at his job, and because Courtney is so anti-David. David again asks Julia to represent him, and they end up having a long talk in the Capwell atrium while David's supposed to be clearing out. He's got his suitcase in his hand, but they have this long thing, and then Julia gets him to sit down and relate his whole story to her as if she was the jury. And I have to say, I thought David was kind of overacting his grief a little bit. If I were on the jury, I was like, okay, this guy's really overdoing it. And while Julia doesn't say that, she does say, the press will say it's all an act.
And I have to say, I think this was a very strange strategic decision to discuss this entire case and rehearse, what it might look like on the stand in the actual bosom of the beast, right in the heart of the Capwell house. Because they're, of course, the ones who are going to go after David. So that was odd to me. I
mean, based on what sets they had, the boathouse probably takes up a lot of space. Maybe Orient Express and Capitol Place were really the only two options, and that one, made more sense to be empty. So Mason shows up and says, David, you shouldn't still be hanging around here. You'll have plenty of time for that when you're convicted. Hanging joke there. Julia says it's unethical for a prosecutor to show clear prejudice. And then Mason says it's inappropriate for her to make such a comment unless she is, in fact, representing David. And she says, yes, I am. So she has agreed to represent David against Mason in court.
Now, I have to note that all through this episode, and maybe even the one before, I can't remember, Mason's been goading Julia to take David's case.
He wants to go up against her.
He wants to. But, you have to remember, he knows about what happened with Julia back in Phoenix. So I think he feels like if she takes the case, that's going to be really good for him because he can break her in the way she was broken.
But I wonder, I think it'll be good because she's very competent, and there won't be this capability afterwards of saying, oh, we had bad representation. I think Mason wants it to look good, and maybe it's a little like you don't want to play tennis with someone who's terrible. You want to play with someone who's as good as you, that can give you a good game. That I think there may be a little of that with Mason.
Well, for the viewer, it's definitely going to be good because I think these two going head to head will be really enjoyable to watch.
One thing that occurs to me about the boathouse, which I'm obsessed with, and its newfound size, that I forgot to mention yesterday when Warren came out of the water, is that there's definitely water now. I think when Gina went in, I don't know if we specifically saw water, if they just cheated it with sound effects, but definitely with the scuba diver coming out of the water, there's now a tank there, at least underneath one of the two slips. So I'm wondering if they actually rebuilt that set over a tank for this purpose. And that's why it looks so different to me. The lighting is a bit better. It definitely looks roomier. Maybe it's all because of that, the fact that they actually rebuilt it in order so that they could use a tank.
I think that's possible, which begs the question, if they've gone to all that work, will we be seeing a lot more of the boathouse?
Mm-hmm. We've been seeing a lot of the gazebo for the last 2 weeks, so another favored location. Did we already talk about that? Yes. So now, Kelly goes to the cemetery to visit Joe's headstone. And we hear Peter Flint laughing, and Kelly looks over to the giant plinth of a headstone that Ginger Jones had bought for Peter. And Peter Flint is sitting on top of the headstone like some sort of mythical sprite, eating an apple with a knife and saying, "You're never going to be able to get away from me." And then he starts laughing, and then he vanishes. And Kelly turns to run out of the cemetery and runs straight into Dylan.
Following the poor woman even to the cemetery. And, apart from the whole Peter Flint thing, she's obviously there to visit Joe's grave. So to me, Dylan popping up is even more of an intrusion because of that. But we actually had a bit of a discussion about Peter Flint's grave marker.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you researched it at all, but...
No, but I think I remember that you were right, so...
But anyway, we actually thought it had the wrong name on it.
I didn't look at it. Diane noticed it said Peter Flint on it. And of course, originally, when Ginger bought it, it was a big long poem, and it said Antonio Fiorno, Peter's real name. So yeah, I hadn't spotted that Peter Flint was on there because I was so excited to see Stephen Meadows back and his wacky antics. So yeah, so maybe there's an in-story reason why his giant headstone would have Peter Flint's name on it now after a year. Yeah, so no question now as to whether Stephen Meadows is back rather than them just using old footage. Definitely this is a brand new scene, and other than he's probably going to be stuck in that jacket for the rest of his time, I think we can look forward to some amusing scenes of Peter, taunting Kelly with sort of Great Gazoo-like asides when she's trying to, just go about her life. And maybe they're like a running Greek chorus saying amusing and also frightening and disturbing things.
So how telling is it that the ghost of Peter Flint, who is this sort of sadistic image of a serial killer, is still so much more appealing than a living Dylan?
Too bad they can't battle. So yeah, I hope we see Peter Flint a few more times as this progresses. And luckily I kept this dried carnation because I had some memory that at some point Stephen Meadows returns as Peter, but I thought it was far, far in the future. So this I might have been mixing him up with another dead character or another gone character. So anyway, I'm glad that we got him so soon, and hope we'll be as amused by his antics as Kelly is terrified. We had crew credits and cast credits this episode, and new addition to the main cast, Justin Moore as Larry Poindexter. No, got that backwards. Larry Poindexter as Justin Moore. And Larry Poindexter has, in recent years, been seen playing a priest on Days of Our Lives. And I think he was on Friends at some point. But, you know, there's probably a lot of credits in between that I don't know about. Yeah, it's kind of a fun character. Potential new love interest for Kelly. We'll see. I can remember very little other than he's constantly climbing through a window.
So far, he does seem to be a little more viable than any of the other ones she's stuck with.
In the day player section, Detective, Paul Eiding, and Peter Flint, Stephen Meadows. So that's it for week 90. We will be back in 2 weeks with week 91 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's just that I care about you, Kelly. I can't say I've always liked you, but I've always cared about you.
This is Justin Moore,
Hi.
Nathan.
Hi. What's a Justin Moore besides wet?
It's a next-door neighbor. What's a mason besides a bricklayer?
Don't tell me. Surf's up.
What top are you wearing?
I am wearing that blue one that's the same as the other blue one that has the dark blue piping that E wore on Entourage. It's the match of it.
What's its little insignia on it?
This is a carnation that I wore for Peter.
Oh.
For Peter's return. Because I didn't have my real carnation with me. I'll have to swap it out when I get home. I forgot to take it with me. I didn't think we'd get to this Peter episode before I got back, so I didn't take the carnation or the blue Santa Barbara shirt.